Mr. Arun Puri, delegates to the India Today Conclave, ladies and gentlemen, just taking from what Arun said towards the end, I hope you had a sound sleep last night. It's time to wake up and smell the coffee. South Asia today is perhaps the most difficult place in the world. It is the epicenter of terrorism. It's also the epicenter of Maoism. Being the largest country in South Asia, largest in terms of size, population, as well as the size of the economy, all countries in South Asia look to India either as a friend or as a foe. Seen from a strategic point of view, India holds the key to political and economic stability in South Asia. And our responsibility is great because of our democratic and secular credentials, underpinned by steady progress in the socio-economic sectors. India is seen as a friend by countries which wish to take the same path: democracy, secularism, pluralism, and inclusive growth. India is seen as a threat by some countries for a variety of reasons. It's hardly necessary for me to list the countries or the reasons. It therefore falls upon India to disprove the tag that it is a threat to any neighbor and send the message that it is ready to become the engine of change and the leader of economic development in the region. The most serious threat arises from jihadi terrorism. It's unfortunate that the 21st century has seen a throwback to the days of the Crusades. It appears that the world is getting divided into Islamic nations and non-Islamic nations. That is sad. It also portends a very grim future for countries which have both people professing the Islamic faith as well as a very large number of people professing other faiths. The best example is India. Any conflict between Islam and other religions has its greatest and most deleterious impact on countries like India. We are victims of jihadi terrorism. The epicenter of jihadi terrorism is Afghanistan, Pakistan. There are elements in other countries such as Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and now even elements in the Maldives. while we are obliged to take steps to strengthen our security system, we are doing that and we will continue to do that. It is important that people belonging to all faiths in India learn to live in peace and harmony. Jihadi terrorism may not exactly be the flip side of communal violence, but communal violence, communal disharmony creates an environment where jihadi terrorism can flourish. If the poor Indian Muslim boy, or sometimes even a girl, does not believe that he or she can live in India with equal rights, equal status, dignity, professing his or her faith, and be able to aspire to a life of reasonable prosperity, many of them are likely to be recruited to the cause of jihadi terrorism. It's therefore very important that for a country like India, we ensure that people belonging to all faiths are able to live together in peace and harmony, with equality, with dignity, and are able to share the benefits of inclusive growth. Having said that, let me say that just because we are able to find a way in which people can live in peace and harmony does not mean that jihadi terrorism will come to an end. The jihadi terrorist today has set before himself or herself enemies all over the world. Israel, the United States, Russia, countries of Europe, even if the cause be that a newspaper in a country publishes a cartoon, writers, and even China. South Asia, therefore, has a duty to work together to put an end to jihadi terrorism. As far as India is concerned, Bangladesh, until some time ago, emerged as a major hub of terrorist groups targeting India and an important launching pad for jihadi violence. It became a transit point for terrorists to be exfiltrated out of India through Bangladesh to Pakistan and to be infiltrated into India through Bangladesh. Likewise, Nepal became another point of exfiltration and infiltration. Recently, there have been attempts to find safe havens in Maldives, in Sri Lanka, but these have been sporadic. It's therefore very important that we work with all our neighbors, and I'm happy that we have received, after Sheikh Hasina's government took over, splendid cooperation from Bangladesh. Likewise, we have received splendid cooperation from Bhutan, and more recently from Sri Lanka. We still have to find a way to work with Nepal and Myanmar, but I'm sure over a period of time, our efforts on this behalf also will succeed. The return of Sheikh Hasina in the parliamentary elections in 2009 is a significant development not only for Bangladesh but also for the immediate neighborhood. Sri Lanka has emerged from nearly 30 years of insurgency. They have re-elected President Rajapaksa and they're preparing for parliamentary elections. India has a huge stake in Sri Lanka. India has invested in Sri Lanka's economic recovery and will need to put in place mechanisms to continue at a pace. India is also obliged, in her own interest, to help Sri Lanka build a consensus and find an answer to its ethnic problem. As far as Nepal is concerned, recent developments are a matter of grave concern. A long period of political instability in this neighboring country is taking its toll on economic issues, besides impacting on subjects of concern. It has led to sprouting of anti-India activities, challenging the security of the Siliguri corridor in North Bengal, besides providing sanctuary to those desirous of fomenting problems in the eastern part of India. Myanmar is in the process of yet another experiment with military-dictated parliamentary democracy. Whether that model will succeed, I do not wish to comment on that. However, Myanmar, like the former East Pakistan, is home to Indian insurgent groups, which that state tolerates as state policy to act as insurance against perceived Indian inimical designs. We would have to evolve a policy required to meet the emerging challenges in Myanmar. China, although not quite part of South Asia, is clearly in the driver's seat as far as Asia is concerned. China has made no secret of its ambitions to become the dominant player in South Asia. It is in the driver's seat in our immediate neighborhood, especially in the countries that I referred to above. It has a distinct advantage because it has forged its foreign policy in this region to secure its trade and security interests. Turning to the next issue of Naxalism or Maoism, it's a graver problem than jihadi terrorism. Jihadi terrorism can be countered, and usually successfully, if we are able to share intelligence and act in real time. That is why 2009 was a year free of terrorist attacks. 2010 began with a blot on our record. Pune was indeed a blot, but I hope that we have learnt our lessons from Pune too. Maoism is an even graver threat. Today, the Naxalites have a presence in over 200 districts. They are capable of striking in 83 districts. They virtually dominate 34 districts. They have declared war on the Indian state. The government, and certainly not I, we do not use words like enemy or war. The Maoists use them routinely. A recent document that we were able to unearth in January 2010 is titled Low Intensity Conflict is the latest counter-insurgency doctrine of the imperialist meaning the Indian government, defeat low-intensity conflict through protracted people's war. That is the title of the document. The document goes on to say that the Maoists must evolve a revolutionary strategy to defeat the enemy. It lays emphasis on political, organizational, and military preparedness by the outfit. And it spells out a number of steps with the aim of capturing power through an armed liberation struggle. What saddens me is that civil society groups, NGOs, human rights activists do not understand the character of the Maoists. They believe, rather naively, that the Maoists are friends of the poor and their goal is the emancipation and the development of the poor. Nothing can be further from the truth. The Maoists are anti-development. They do not want the poor to be either emancipated or to become economically free. Why do they demolish school buildings? Why do they blow up railway tracks that are laid in those areas? Why do they plant landmines on roads that are constructed in those areas? Why do they drive away doctors and teachers who are sent to rural India? Their goal is armed liberation struggle. Their sole objective is the seizure of power. And for that, they wish to create what are called liberated zones. They have begun this in areas where the tribals live, because they are the most poor, they're the most illiterate, and the most vulnerable. Their hold on the tribals is not because they are helping the tribals. Their hold on the tribals is largely because they have put the fear of force in the tribals. Their goal is to expand what are called liberated zones. And only yesterday, one of their leaders declared that it's their goal to expand their armed liberation struggle activities to urban areas, set up urban cells, unleash urban guerrilla warfare, and to create chaos in India's cities. Responding to concerns expressed by human rights activists, we have said, yes, we will talk, provided you abjure violence. Why are the Maoists unable to make this simple statement? We abjure violence. They will never abjure violence. And their document says that. We will never lay down arms. We will never abjure violence because it's part of our policy that we can seize power only through an armed liberation struggle. Faced with that, what does the state do? What should the state do? The state therefore says it is a legitimate right of the state to use that much of force that is necessary to reclaim control over territories where the civil writ does not run. That is precisely the way we have formulated our policy. States have fallen in line. We now have an enthusiastic response from Maharashtra, Chhattisgarh, more recently Bengal and Jharkhand and Orissa, and I'm sure the one or two other states that seem ambivalent will quickly accept this policy and join the operations against the Maoists. I'm confident that if we remain steadfast on this path, careful, controlled, calibrated operations to reclaim territories that are dominated by the Maoists, we should be able to rid ourselves of this menace in about 2 to 3 years and then bring about development. As we reclaim control over areas, we should be able to rush in development. These are the twin challenges that Arun mentioned. I endorse what he said. One is jihadi terrorism, the other is Maoism. But I think in recent months, there is a greater degree of consensus and commonality of approach of how we can face to these twin threats and overcome them. I'm confident that before the term of UPA 2 is over, we would have substantially got rid of the menace of Naxalism, and we would have strengthened our security system to face up to any threat of terror from any corner of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chidambaram, for giving us a quick roundup on our neighbors and, of course, a more detailed analysis of the Maoists. The floor will be open for questions now, but I'll take the privilege as the moderator to ask the first question. Mr. Chidambaram, you gave us a quick roundup about our neighbors, but I think you missed out the 200-pound gorilla sitting in the room, which is Pakistan. Very little mention of that. You've talked about Naxalites abjuring, to use your words, violence before you start talking to them. What about Pakistan? Pakistan does not abjure from inspiring terrorism, supporting terrorism. You've given them 10 dossiers on 26/11. They've dismissed it as literature. Is there a difference in approach? Shouldn't we be taking a tougher stand with Pakistan? Or is this, we talk to them, but nothing really happens? What is your view on that? How should we be approaching? And why didn't you look at Pakistan in your talk?
Well, frankly, I deliberately avoided mention of Pakistan because that would require a special session. And you had allotted me only about 15 minutes. On Pakistan, it's our neighbor. We cannot change our neighbor. We can only make an attempt to change our neighbor's behavior towards us. This neighbor has been a very difficult neighbor from 1947. There have been, if you'll pardon the expression, lucid intervals, but it's been a long story of perceived enmity and animosity on the part of India towards Pakistan. It's completely untrue. We have a serious problem with Pakistan revolving around Kashmir. We acknowledge that. But what other problem do we have? And why should we have any other problem? We have said that we can resolve the Kashmir issue through bilateral talks. Instead of limiting our differences to that one issue, Pakistan has now created a whole lot of issues and has backed its approach to India by allowing state and non-state actors to support terrorism in India. It's no secret that every militant organization that is based in Pakistan is supported by the ISI. The Lashkar, the Hizbul Mujahideen, the JUD, Al-Badr, every one of them is supported by the ISI. And every one of them was earlier based in Pakistan, but now they have been able to reach into India, set up modules here, set up cells here, and are able to operate those modules and cells. Now, if it is state policy to ignore the distinction between state and non-state players, if it is state policy to sponsor terrorism, if it is state policy to export terrorism to India, how do we deal with that state? It becomes very difficult to deal with Pakistan, and you can see how difficult it is to deal with it. We have struggled with it in many ways. Nevertheless, we have said, we are willing to talk, but let's talk about items that immediately concern us, and which is terror. We tried to make a beginning with the Foreign Secretary's talk, but nothing came out of it, I'm afraid. But I'm told we are still open to another round of talks between the Foreign Secretaries. It's a difficult neighbor. That neighbor must reinvent itself. And one way to reinvent it, if it can, we wish it will, if it can become a truly democratic country where the real power lies in democratically elected leaders' hands.
Just to follow up, a quick answer. Do you think we're too soft with them?
I don't think so. Whether we are soft or whether we are hard is a matter of perception. But let's remember, the two countries are today nuclear powers. War is not an option. If war is not an option, then we must talk when we can, when we think there can be progress. At other times, we have to simply be vigilant and alert. Is war an option with Pakistan? I leave that question with you. In our view, it is not.
What would be our response if there was another 26/11, God forbid?
If, and this is I want to underline if we are able to establish with reasonable degree of certainty that another attack on India emanated from Pakistani soil, then we will respond swiftly and decisively.
With military action?
I can only say we will respond swiftly and decisively. You can comment on that after we respond swiftly and decisively.